L.A., come on vacation, go home on probation.
You say Los Angeles, you say period, you say mystery, and every movie lover's head is filled with images from The Big Sleep or Chinatown or Out of the Past or those great, film noirs from the 40s. I love those pictures, but I wanted L.A. Confidential to be something different. I did not want it to be an homage to a style from the past or neo-noir, if you will. And equally importantly, I wanted it to be perceived as being something different so that I could get the financing for the movie. Because pictures that have tried to capture that world of film noir have tended to not do well at the box office, and consequently nobody's eager to invest in them.
As years progressed and I went on and became the president and chief operating officer of MGM, the irony was, if I had come into my office to say, will you make L.A. Confidential, I would have said no. This movie got willed to get made against incredible odds and against a business environment that said, this is the kind of movie that should not be made.
I get such a kick out of seeing the Warner Brother logo on the front of L.A. Confidential. Warner Brothers, the studio that brought us Edward G. Robinson as Little Caesar, James Cagney as Public Enemy, Bogart in so many great pictures, right up through Bonnie and Clyde. Entertaining melodramas all, but also unique in that they all looked at life in America through a slightly subversive lens. And I like to feel that our picture and our guys, Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce, are an extension of that tradition. L.A. Confidential, the movie, started when I read James Ellroy's book.
In 1988 and 89, I wrote L.A. Confidential. It was big. It was epic. It was huge. It was a book for the whole family, if the name of your family is the Charles Manson family.
I found myself hooked on his characters, and I found myself having a very interesting emotional reaction to them. As you meet each of these guys, Bud, Ed, and Jack, you don't like them. And yet, as I kept going, I found myself getting emotionally involved with each and every one of them. And the more I thought about that, I thought if I could replicate that experience for the movie-going audience, I would have a unique movie. I would also have one that dealt with one of my favorite themes, something I've dealt with before, the difference between image and reality. And I would be able to do what I'd always wanted to do, which is deal with that theme in Los Angeles, the city of manufactured illusion. I discovered that David Walper had optioned the movie rights to the book some 3 or 4 years before.
My wife was reading the book L.A. Confidential. She said, you ought to read the book, it makes an interesting read. So I read the book and I said, gee, this would make a good miniseries for television. And I started to go to the 3 television networks. I couldn't sell any of the 3 networks on the idea.
Nat Sobel, my agent, and I laughed like hell because we thought this was movie adaptation, bro. It was big, it was bad, it was bereft of sympathetic characters. It was unconstrainable, uncontainable, and unadaptable.
So I went out and had a meeting with David and with Bill Gerber, who was the point person for Warner Brothers, and made a deal to write and direct the movie.
Here's a director who has such a passion for a film that you can't just turn him away. He's a terrific director, and with such passion, you've got to listen.
Cut. Of the many, many, many decisions made on L.A. Confidential, as it happens, the luckiest one, and in hindsight, the smartest one, was also the first one. And that was to team up with Brian Helgeland, who had been very interested in adapting L.A. Confidential.
Basically couldn't get anyone to even talk to me about it. And then when I finally got a meeting at Warner's to pitch how I would do the book, and 2 days before that, my agent called and told me that the meeting was canceled because they had hired you to do it.
Missy Malkin, your agent, called up and said,
right,
you got to meet this guy, Brian.
I was used to pitching to studios. Now I had to kind of pitch to the guy who had already been hired to do it.
It just seemed that we both felt the same way, that extraordinary liberties would have to be taken with that convoluted, dense plot of Ellroy, but that there'd be a way to let the characters kind of guide us through that.
Right, to try and preserve the people and not the plot.
There were certain plot elements that always were a kind of constant that we wanted to keep, sort of set pieces?
Bloody Christmas, Night Owl,
Exley's interrogation scene.
Bud's whole relationship with Lynn.
It's a world where actors are using drugs. This is the famous shot of Robert Mitchum getting out of jail after his marijuana bust. What I love about this photo is Mitchum looks better here than he looks in his movies. You can imagine that the costume person and makeup and hair are right around that corner, and it gets right to the theme of LA Confidential, the difference between image and reality. And behind the image, there was real-life crime going on. This is the real Johnny Stompanato, dead on the floor of Lana Turner's house. This happened several years after our movie takes place. The architecture of the movie, as represented by the shot of a 50s house, I wanted to be true to the 50s, but selectively true. What I wanted to do was put the accent on those things in the 50s that were modern, that were forward-looking, and that in fact still feel contemporary today. My hope was that the audience watching the movie, in fact, would at a certain point be allowed to forget that they were watching a period movie at all. They would just be focused on the characters and their emotions. I did not want to tell the story of LA Confidential through the lens of nostalgia. This is a publicity shot of an actor named Guy Madison. I use this to illustrate what Ed Exley would look and feel like. And I deliberately picked a couple of actors that most people wouldn't know, because my dream was to cast an Ed Exley that the audience wouldn't know, that the audience would not already have an emotional history with, and they wouldn't know what to make of him until they discovered him through the course of the story. This is my stand-in for Bud White. This is an actor named Aldo Ray, publicity shot, obviously taken at the beach. I later sent a copy of this photo to Russell Crowe in Australia once we had signed him, and I said, Bud at the beach. And Russell kept this in his script until we started shooting. With the actors, more often than not, I met them actually here at the Formosa, so that in the midst of the presentation I could say, and by the way, we're shooting a couple scenes right here in the Formosa. I did that because I wanted them to feel that LA Confidential would appear to be reality-based. My number one directive to each of my collaborators was, let's recreate Los Angeles in the way that we want it to be for LA Confidential. Let's pay great attention to the details. But then when we shoot the movie, let's act as though we don't care about the details. Let's push them to the background so that the characters and their emotions can be in the foreground. I didn't want the movie to be about the cars and about the set dressing. I wanted it to be about the people and their emotions.
The dialogue initially led me. It was just such a wonderfully written piece. They both did, Curtis and Brian, they did a wonderful job.
I remember when we finally had the draft where we said, okay, let's show it to Ellroy and see what the hell he thinks about it. And his reaction was, let's have dinner.
Right.
Which we knew was obviously a good sign.
Well, you thought it was. I was convinced it was a hit.
I think Curtis Hanson and Brian Helgeland, the co-scenarists, brilliantly adapted my book. Hanson and Helgeland took my three-man structure, everything seen through the eyes of Bud White, Ed Exley, and Jack Vincennes, and brilliantly condensed the story down to manageable proportions.
The script and the movie are kind of a hybrid between a studio movie and an independent movie. Studio movie because it's a period picture, it's big, 45 locations, 80 speaking parts. It needs that kind of feel, budget, and so forth. On the other hand, it's the kind of movie the major studios don't want to make because it's multi-character. It does not lend itself to being a star vehicle.
I saw an opportunity, a character-driven piece with a studio backing it. That's kind of unheard of. So, I think in independent filmmaking you get more of an opportunity.
Billy Gerber engineered a smooth segue over to Regency and Arnon Milchan and Michael Nathanson, who eventually became my producing partners.
Before you hear the story, you look at the eyes. The look I got is the look of passion and decency at the same time. You know, very often you don't get them together.
My request was that he not be allowed to read the script because I didn't want him to imagine the movie that I wanted to make. So I put together a group of 18 photographs. Some of them were pictures I'd had for years as a longtime Angelino. They represented the movie of my dreams.
Curtis' visuals spoke a million words.
He bought in to the movie that I wanted to make.
I had to be in this movie. I had to be in business with Curtis.
He rolled the dice with me. He rolled the dice big time. My hope was to cast actors that the audience didn't already know, actors that the audience could discover the way I had discovered them in the book. Russell Crowe was somebody who I had seen in a picture called Romper Stomper, where he plays a neo-Nazi skinhead. And I knew from that that he could play the brutal side of Bud White. We flew him over here, I met with him, we talked about the character, and I put him on tape doing a scene.
Get out of the hospital! A naked guy with a gun. You expect anyone to believe that? What's the matter? I wrote another arrest via perfect record. Get the out of my face. I think it's gonna look on your report. You worry about how it's gonna look, okay? What it is justice. That's what the fat got. Justice.
And I took this tape out to Arnon's house.
I said, this guy is great.
I said, this is my Bud White.
So I said, who is he? He said, well, it's a guy called Russell Crowe. I said, oh, he's great. Where is he from? I said, oh, he's Australian. I said, oh, he's Australian. Okay.
No other roles were cast in the movie until he cast Bud White. Later on, I heard that there was, you know, a number of people actively pushing the studio to push me out of the way. But at the time, for me, it was kind of scary, you know, because you make a big commitment when you leave all the other job opportunities and sign up to a particular film, and especially one like this where I was totally engrossed in and engaged by. I just thought, well, the only thing I can do here is just stick to my guns. You know, if I sort of take a step back to argue the point, I might create a gap, you know? If I just keep turning up to rehearsal and doing the things that I need to do, then maybe I'll get over all this shit, which is what happened.
A few weeks later, Mally Finn, my fabulous casting director, she brought in Guy Pearce. He walked in the door. I had no idea who he was. I'd never seen him before. We said hello. I could tell from his voice that he was from Australia. He sat down. He gave a reading for the part of Ed Exley, and he was dynamite.
You did Casita's youth camp with him, right?
I gave him a few pointers just to have him do it again and do it a little differently to see if he could make the adjustments. And I was very impressed, so I brought him back, and I put him on tape.
Well, Leroy told me you went sissy up at Casitas. You couldn't do the time, so you got yourself a big white boy to look after you. Said they called you Sugar because you gave it out so sweet.
I took the tape again out to Arnon's beach house, and I just said, here's Ed Exley.
And Curtis says he's Australian. I said, what? You're kidding. He said, we're doing a period movie in Los Angeles with the 2 Australian leads.
I find working with accents, putting on a different accent to me is just like putting on another jacket.
It's been a learning curve here very definitely for me coming to America. I feel very privileged being able to come to America and make movies.
I feel very lucky, you know, to be working with these guys.
And Arnon, he took a big gulp and he said, but Curtis, are we going to have any names in this picture? And I said, yes, for the part of Jack Vincennes, the big V, Hollywood Jack, a movie star among cops. That's a perfect part for a movie star.
Freeze! Police!
But again, I wanted a movie star who could still surprise the audience. I met Kevin on LA Confidential for the first time at the Formosa, the way I met a number of my collaborators, and I showed him the same photo presentation, and then I handed him the script, and I said, Kevin, when you read this, I want you to think of 2 words. Dean Martin, the epitome of 50s hip. The laid-back guy, dressed to the nines, a beautiful woman on his arm, the answer to every question.
Hey, you know me, I'm keeping the streets safe, boys.
It's the best bit of direction I could have possibly given Kevin. He took that idea of the Dean Martin persona and reinvented it to fit himself, and then shows us the man who, little by little, has lost his soul.
He's got all this veneer and exterior going on, and yet there's something underneath that's just not right. And he finally, I think, begins to recognize that in the course of the film.
I feel that Kim Basinger was more or less born to play the part of Lynn Bracken.
He was so convinced that I was the Veronica Lake character that he convinced me that I was going to play her. When someone believes in you that much, that's half the battle. You want to work with people who believe in you and want you in the role,
She's sad, she's wise, she's the one character that knows the truth about herself and can see the truth in the other characters. Like Veronica Lake, Kim has a very powerful image. And I think Kim, more than probably any woman alive, knows that an image like that is both an asset and also a liability.
I love doing Irish dialect, so I did my Irish dialect. He said, "Oh, that's great, that's great." And he let me know almost instantly that I was the one he wanted for it, which made me even more pleased by the whole process.
Having never played anybody like that before, and it was also kind of a last-minute thing, and that kind of makes me a little anxious. I would like a little more time to explore the character.
He said, "I don't know this guy. I don't know him." And I said, "That's okay. You'll find him." And I said, for the first step on your journey to finding him, take a look at, and I recommended a couple of movies to him that starred Zachary Scott.
And on the basis of the experience with River Wild, I said, "Sure, Curtis, I'd be glad to jump on board at the last minute."
The fun thing about Danny DeVito's character is that he's a visionary, sort of Christopher Columbus of tabloid journalism.
He has no qualms or any kind of feeling, moral feelings about, luring a couple of, stars who are under contract at Metro into some kind of compromising situation and then, photographing it and sticking it on the front of his magazine.
Curtis was an absolute delight. I mean, still to this day, he's the sort of benchmark that I measure all other directors against in a way. He really wanted to make sure that you understood the world that you were entering into, which is perfect because quite often you walk onto a film set and you're not quite sure what film you're making, which can be trouble.
I think he was really lucky, not only when he got Kevin, that eased a bit of tension, and when he got Danny DeVito, that eased a lot of tension. And Kim Basinger was like the icing on the cake, And I think at that point, he had sufficient star wattage to get on and make his film.
And behind the camera, I was able to put together an unbelievable group of collaborators, starting with Dante Spinotti, a cameraman whose work I'd known and admired for years. My number one directive to my collaborators was, let's push the set dressing and so forth into the background so that the characters and their emotions are in the foreground. And Dante, of course, immediately got what I was talking about, and he suggested a whole lighting style, a kind of naturalistic look where the audience would understand where the light was coming from in every scene, and it would be very different than what one thinks of as classic film noir, that highly stylized lighting with the long, dark shadows. Janine Opperwall is an extraordinary production designer. We had 45 locations. My goal was to find locations that would not call attention to themselves as period locations. We wanted the movie to feel ordinary, casual in its period look. Our costume designer, Ruth Myers, created high style in the grand Hollywood tradition to assist Lynn Bracken in the creation of her fantasies. For the other characters, she was true to the period, but again, with the accent on the modern, on that which would feel contemporary. With close to 80 speaking parts and numerous featured extras, her job was enormous.
The hours were punishing, and I used to drive home, because I lived in those days in the Hollywood Hills, 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and I just would be completely happy because the whole group feeling was towards excellence. And that's quite rare.
I love music, and I love music in movies. With LA Confidential, I picked a lot of the songs back when Brian and I were writing the script, and most of them before we started shooting, which allowed me actually to play them on the set when we were shooting a given scene. For instance, the scene where Kevin Spacey's in the frolic room sitting at the bar. I had Dean Martin on the jukebox that night, and as Kevin looks in the mirror and he's feeling remorseful about what he's done and regretful about what he's become, you hear Dean Martin singing, "Smile, smile, smile." Then, of course, I needed underscoring to play the emotion, to play the action, and I brought in Jerry Goldsmith, with whom I had worked on The River Wild. It was a unique challenge for Jerry because I already had all the songs in the picture, and what Jerry needed to do was not only create a score, but do it in such a way that it wouldn't feel like the songs and the score were in two different pictures. The motif that was consistent in the songs was the trumpet of Chet Baker in several tracks and Bobby Hackett on a couple of others. So Jerry took the trumpet and used it throughout the score to create a musical whole. When Peter Honess, my patient, creative, diligent editor, and I had a first cut of the movie, and we took it out to show it to Arnon and David Walper and Michael Nathanson and David Madelon and so forth. We were nervous in the way that one always is at that time. What you really learn from a first screening is not anything constructive, but you learn how the emotional state is going to be for the next few months. You know, whether you're going to be kind of fighting while you're trying to do what you do, or whether you're going to be feeling good while you try to do what you do.
But I walked out of the screening room, and I'm seeing all these guys with these notes, and I came out and said, guys, I don't have any notes before anybody opens their mouth. This is a masterpiece. This is our greatest movie ever. I mean, I have not seen a better movie since we've started this company.
His enthusiasm was so obvious and contagious that I don't know whether everybody else felt that way or not, but they weren't about to be the one to throw cold water on the spirit.
I never go to film festivals, but I went with Arnon to Cannes, and it was fun. So many people celebrating.
We came very playfully to Cannes, and we decided no matter what happened, our first award is going to be the most fun premiere. And we rented this villa and had fireworks, and we actually celebrated the fact that we actually managed to make the movie. We also enjoyed the fact that we got discovered by the American press in Europe, in Cannes. It was quite a nice feeling to go with an American movie and not be embarrassed by the European critics.
And we all felt like we sort of deserved it because the film was really good, you know. There was a real awareness, I think, that we'd made something that was fairly classic.
The time we got back to Los Angeles, it was just a different thing. I'd go to meetings and everybody knew about that film now.
The reaction was amazing. There was such enthusiasm, and we were all just so happy. And it just felt like the completion of such a beautiful partnership.
I think that the theme of the movie is the word facade, and I think the theme of life, one of the many themes of life, is facade. I think we all have facades. I think they're important, but then I think it's wonderful to have someone you can come down and throw that facade to the wind and just be yourself.
Ultimately, it's a story about Los Angeles, and it's a story about what was at the heart of a kind of boom in Los Angeles, of a building and promise of the golden land. And as, of course, things turn out, it's always a little different than it looks.
Here was a compatible vision, unique on its own terms, of a book that I wrote, characters and a milieu that I created. They assumed a brilliant alternative life, and I was flabbergasted and startled by the experience.
I think what I learned from you, which I had to some extent, because I think you have to have it working in show business, but which I really didn't realize the power of, was just the tenacity of just believing in something. Like you said, no one really believes in a good movie except for the people making it.
LA Confidential already seen 7 times. For my own, I just love the movie, so.
The miracle of LA Confidential is not only was I able to make this labor of love, but because Arnon bought into my dream to the degree that he did, and that he was prepared to roll the dice with me to the degree that he was, I was able to make it under the best circumstances I've ever worked.